Hello and welcome to the Power Lunch live show. Yes, you get to see that I actually have a physical green screen behind me because StreamYard is choosing not to believe in backgrounds today. So we work with it. We go with what we got. But the way this show works, for those of you who are new to the show, I bring on up to 4 fun, interesting guests to talk about all kinds of different things. And today is no exception because we have fun, interesting guests to talk about interesting things today. So a little bit about me. I'll introduce myself first because my show. I am Michael Whitehouse, the guy who knows a guy. I'm a professional connector. I bring people together. And I'm running an event called the Entrepreneur Summit that I'll put the info up in a moment because I didn't get the banner ready for that. But it's September 19th. It is called Entrepreneur Episode 5, The Summit Strikes Back. If you get why that's funny, you should come to the summit. If that confuses you or doesn't seem funny, you shouldn't come to the summit. You'll be confused. So if you are a geek who happens to be an entrepreneur, you should come to the Entrepreneur Summit from 11 to 6 Eastern. And I am noodling the idea of running a super summit in 2023 that will be basically a bunch of summits all at the same time, running concurrently different themes. So there's something for everyone because, you got all these summits going on. You're like, which one should I go to? Go to this one. They're all there. So this is a very drawing board idea, but why wait until it's ready to announce it? I'll just talk about it now. That's how I roll. All right, let's meet our guests. So, top of the screen we have here, Wayne Pratt.
Good afternoon. My name is Wayne Pratt. I am a life coach, author, and all-around fun guy, which isn't a mushroom. And I'm looking forward to today.
Very good. And next up is Bobby Aldridge.
Hi, I'm Bobby Aldridge. I'm a strength and conditioning expert. I've been doing this 30 years, and I do a lot of physical therapy on people to reduce pain and improve their performance.
All right, and finally, Phil Johnson.
Hi, I'm for the last 21 years, I've been an executive coach working with executives and organizations all over the world to help them to bet on themselves by developing their emotional intelligence.
Very good. And let's go back to here. So, I got the banner ready. Entrepreneur Summit, September 19th, guywhoknowsaguy.com/EN is where you can register. And the cost to register is no dollars. You can give me money, but you don't have to. You can just show up. I mean, I'll always take your money, but you don't have to give me your money to show up for the Entrepreneur Summit. And all the information is on there. All right. That's enough of my plug. So, Bobby, I'm going to have you lead off because I actually bought one of your setups. And the more you tell me about it, the more value we'll get out of it. So I'm going to have you kick us off and tell us about what you do and what makes you awesome.
So I started this, like I said, 30 years ago, and I was training in the gym, and I'd go away for 2 weeks with my pro athletes, and my clients would be a little bit lost with what I was doing. So over time, I've gotten multiple certifications. I was like the smartest guy in the room when I first started because I had one certification and that's all I knew. So I was an expert. I was the guy. I was doing it right, right? Then after getting all these certifications, I was like, oh my God, there's so much to know and I'm not the smartest guy in the room. So I've learned from all these best guys. Long story short, I came up with this equipment. You can see it in the backgrounds on blocks, mats, and bands to simplify movement for my clients. So when I wasn't with them, they could repeat it exactly as I was teaching it to them. And it's working quite well to the point of I've been helping the San Francisco Giants doctor. I helped his wife for 3 weeks. In her 3rd week, she had 9 months of pain and she was working with all those therapists, chiropractors, all the different people. In 2 weeks, she felt better. She went out and shot her lowest round ever, okay, in golf. And the following week, she did it again. So now her husband's coming over to see me to go like, what the heck are you doing? What did you do with her? And it's very simple. It's not complicated what I teach. The movements are easy for you guys to repeat because of my mat has metrics on it. I don't know if you guys can see it behind me here, but it literally is a mat with numbers going down the middle. And then I have blocks that are 6 inches by 10 inches by 12 inches that are like twice the size of a yoga block, but much softer. So I can put you guys in a position to open up your chest and shoulders and reduce. If you sit all day, everybody's forward like this, right? On their computers, on their phones, everything's forward. So at the end of the day, if you lay on those blocks and just open up your chest and shoulders, it gets your body in a better position. You're able to breathe better and feel better. So, Michael, what I'd like you to start doing is there's a few couple simple exercises to learn, like using the mat, where I usually put the mat up against a wall and I'll do windmills. So I'm going to do these windmills like this with my feet 1 box apart. Then I'm going to go to 2 boxes apart and do another set of 10. Okay. And then I'm going to go to 3 boxes apart. So I'm opening up my adductors. I'm opening up my hips. But when I use the wall over there, the mirror, it keeps my body touching that and opening that all up, right? So any rotation or roundness I have, I'm pulling that all out just by doing the wall windmill. That's one simple exercise. The other one is the runner stretch. So this one, guys, so you understand, Michael, this is gonna be a great one for you. You can do this at your desk.
Ooh.
You put your foot like this, you kneel down behind. Now, if you have my mat, I know my number based on my on this right here. I go to 34, I'm set up, and I'm gonna feel that stretch straight through my hip up into my back. Now, the reason this works is if I did it this way, if I'm showing you hands on, my hips are square. When you're on my mat and you put your feet on the line, now, see how my hips are this way? So I got to pull my hips back and then sink over the top, which is going to stretch my glute, my hamstring, my foot underneath my foot up into my neck. So what you do is you can use the chair and I can move further away. So if I go to 10 inches here, I'll go to 44 here. That's the same distance, right? Now, as you get better, you can change the chair to go here and do the same thing. Now I'm lower and I'm feeling more of a stretch. So what this is going to do, it's really going to stretch out from the bottom of your foot up your calf into your hamstring into your low back and reduce that tension that you guys have. So a simple windmill, pulling out that rotation. A lot of you men will have trouble getting your fingers on the wall and opening your hands wide like that so they're wide. But you do the windmill, you do that runner stretch, you lay on the blocks, and then you do the bands. And the bands are simple. You put them on your knees, double bands, and we strengthen our hips using those bands. Those are, I mean, it's so simple for you guys to do. There's 3 different band exercises that I can show you guys sometime. But it'll really strengthen your hips, because what happens is people stretch, but they don't strengthen. They strengthen, but they don't stretch. Now I'm saying stretch because most people don't understand mobility, okay? The word actually is mobility, okay? Which is length. It's how the joint moves. That's mobility. So if I don't have the range of motion to move my joint, I'm gonna have to lengthen it. So you wanna lengthen it, soft tissue work it, that's a foam roller, and then strengthen it to hold it. It's like typing code on a computer. I'm going to do the lengthen in the soft tissue. That's the code. And then I'm going to strengthen it. That's pushing enter. That's going to hold it in place. And if you do all 3 of those, you'll start to feel amazing. And that's why it works so well. It's that combination. So when I do that windmill, this one, I'll roll out my IT band on the side of my leg right here. I'll roll this out and I'll roll my adductor out, okay? So when I do the runner stretch, I'll get a little bit more of that IT band to get that length, and it helps it out. And then I'll jump into the bands on my knees where I do the double bands. I put mini bands above my knee and below my knees, and then I do about 6 different positions: sitting, laying on my back, bridging. But it's strength.
And those bands are holding your legs together, right?
Yeah, I can show you real simply how it works. Grab this and this. So you're basically just sitting on the ground, guys. You put these bands over your knees. Put this one below your knees. And depending on how strong you are, you put the bands on. Start with the light and medium. I'm doing heavy and light right now. But I'm sitting like this. I'm going to move my knees back out and in just 2 inches. Okay. I look like this. So on my mat, I'm 2 boxes apart right here. See how I have 90 degrees? And then I go out and in. So I do 10 to 30 of these, and then I go down to my elbows. Do 10 to 30, down on my back, 10 to 30, lift up, 10 to 30, and then down, up, out, and do that. And then I do one leg, so it's straight out, and hold for 5 seconds, and do 6 sets of this, 5 seconds. Now, if you guys, when you hold this out and you start to cramp in your hamstring, that's because your glutes aren't firing, okay? And that's a huge problem for many people, and I'll explain why. You guys know John Lynch, the football player? Remember him?
Nope.
John Lynch. He used to play for for Denver, I think it was. Long story short, he pulled his hamstring, and the trainers for the NFL said, "You're out for the next 6 weeks." He calls Pete Agoscu, who was his trainer at the time. He told Pete, and Pete says, "How's your butt feel?" And he goes, "What do you mean, how's my butt feel?" He goes, "I'll squeeze your butt." He squeezes it. He goes, "Feels a little uneven." So he keeps squeezing it. 2 minutes later, Pete says, "How's your butt feel now?" "Wow, it feels a little bit more even." He's all, "Good, touch your toes." You don't touch your toes when you have a hamstring pull. So his glutes weren't working, so his hamstring was overworking, and that's why it felt like it was a hamstring pull. So the NFL trainers didn't even understand this. And this goes on all the time, okay? So like I said, simplicity, but complex. So I'm teaching you something that's super complex. I could get into all the muscle groups, what muscles working with what and why and all that. Super complex, but it's super simple to just do it, you know? That makes sense, Michael?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad I have it recorded because now I can go back to it. Although I assume you got something on the website that has the
Yeah, I have videos for you that'll specifically walk you through foam rolling. It'll show you exactly what I just talked about, the windmill, how to foam roll, how to strengthen it, and we'll go through that.
Yeah, at least know the basics. Like I can now go use those blocks and
literally, if people are doing things properly, 8 out of 10 people are going to start feeling better and move on with their life. There's maybe the 10%, 20% that have some issues because they haven't done anything in 40 years, right? And they're out trying to play golf, or they're trying to just go walking, or they just say, "I'm too old," or whatever. I was just talking about this morning with some clients. I'm taller now than I've ever been. I just went to the doctor again. I'm taller. I'm 52 years old. I was 6'1" to 6'2". They're now marking me at 6'2.5" every time I go to the doctor now. I'm all, that's not possible. I'm 6'1.5" to 6'2" with shoes off. They go, "No, you're 6'2". And I went to the doctor again with a different doctor, and they marked me at 6'2" again. So how many people do you know that are getting older and getting taller? It's only because my posture's better. I'm really better. So it's like, you can change how you feel just by doing these things. And I do them consistently, daily. I mix them into my lifestyle.
Yep.
So that's my big thing, Michael, is that one a day.
Where in my house do I have a wall that has 6 feet of open wall space in front of it? I believe the upstairs hallway is the only room that has that.
It's hard for people to find it in their house. I get it.
Yeah.
100%. And so I'm lucky I have mirrors downstairs, but I have a hallway that we have in our house where we can do them actually on that wall. But many of my clients, every wall in their house is covered. And I tell them, you're just going to have to take one of those paintings off the wall.
Wait a second. If only there were a 9-foot wide wall that didn't have anything in front of it. Yeah, I'm slow, but I figured it out eventually. It just occurred to me that my green screen wall is exactly what I need for this. So,
yeah.
But no, so this has been great. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I'm glad we connected. I can't remember who connected us, but I'm glad they did.
James Hipkin.
Of course, James Hipkin. He's one of my connection. He's made many connections for me. Great guy. But yeah, just definitely glad we connected because you do something that's very unique. A lot of people talk health stuff, and very often it's sort of esoteric and vague. And you're one of the first health people I look at it that I went to your website and was like, "Yeah, I'm going to buy that." because it was obvious what it does. I'm like, okay, I can lie on 2 blocks for 10. Is there an amount of time, or is it like the longer the better?
No, so you start on the 6 inches. If you don't really feel anything, then you go to the 10 inches. But you try to hold 3 to 6 minutes, right? And then that's about good because you'll feel it open up, and then you're good. So, you know, if you can do 6 minutes a day, that's fantastic.
So I need to lie on the floor for 6 minutes a day. I think I can swing that.
Yeah, no, that's why I say everybody can do this. It's not rocket science. You know what I mean? It's so simple. I was teaching this is another favorite one for me, because men are so tight in their adductors, inner thighs, that this one I was teaching the other day. If you guys would do this one, you'd feel great too. So spread your feet wide and just do it where you're comfortable. So for example, if I'm at 50, my hand's going to go at 25. So right here, I'm feeling that stretch, but then I can work on opening up, coming down, and opening up. So big problem with men is your adductors and your T-spine. They lock up as you get older because you don't use them anymore, right? So if I can open this up, you start to feel, wow, I feel better in my hips and low back. So I do 50 inches. I'll do 3 of these on each side, 3 and 3. And then I'll go 2 inches wider with my feet. I'll go 3, 2 inches wider. And then, so I'll work to a number that works for me, right? But I know my number. So if I can get out to 60 right away, like right now, I'm pretty mobile. I feel good right now, okay? But if I squatted, ran, jumped, did all kinds of stuff, and came back here tomorrow and go, wow, 58, I'm really tight today, I'm gonna foam roll my adductors, foam roll, inner thigh, and then I'm going to use those bands to strengthen it afterwards, and I'll feel better instantly. So just a few minutes of that, and you're feeling better. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that's some good stuff. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Wayne. Phil, do you have any questions or thoughts?
I have a question. Thanks, Bobby.
Yeah, you're welcome.
One of the things I do, I get up pretty early in the morning. One of the first things I do is go for a walk. And before I do that, I have this stick I have in the backyard, and I put it behind my back, and I lock it in between my elbows, and I twist. And that really helps me to be a lot more mobile. I'm 68, so and I've been fairly active in my life, but I find that little exercise does a lot to stretch me out first thing in the morning. Why is that?
Well, it's getting your chest and shoulders are open, right? Mm-hmm. So if I show you this, because I have a stick that you're talking about, like this. This is called a stretching pole. Yeah. So you do this, right? So what's that do to my chest and shoulders? Yeah. Sticks them out. Then you're going to rotate, right? So that's pulling all on this intercostal, all that musculature right there. So it's loosening that all up. I'll give you one great one you can do with the pole. Spread your feet wide, okay? If you can touch your back and touch your belly, move in a little bit with your hands. Okay, I still can, so I'll move in. So right here, I'm gonna rotate and drop. Come back to the middle, rotate, drop. This one stretch will work from the bottom of your foot all the way up to the top of your hands, and it'll actually open your lats up. So the one you're doing is great, but this one will literally help you open up. And you just have to do just 10 seconds, come back, switch, 10 seconds, and then I want you to go 2 inches wider with your feet and bring your hands in 2 inches. Make sense? Turn, drop, turn, drop. And then go 2 inches more with the feet and 2 inches in with the hands. So I go in with the hands, out with the feet. You see what I'm doing? Yeah. Open up.
You're increasing the stretch.
You're increasing the stretch, and I'm getting the length, the extension. So all that back and shoulders and all that is going to loosen up. That's the one exercise I use for all of my players.
Cool.
And that's where I use my other, this is my other tool. It's a yoga strap and it has numbers on it. So you can see it has numbers.
Mhm.
So I know exactly where to place my hand. So for me, I can check how I feel. 25, see, I'm already looser from doing that. So 25 for me, I usually start at 28. So I'm already know I'm looser, okay? But I use this to do my exercise. So I go 26, 24, 22, 20, and then I'm pretty good. That makes sense?
Mhm.
So that strap, and it has a little bungee right here. So it gives me that little bit of mobility as I move. Because the body, if it was just a strap, it'd be really stiff. But I can push into that bungee and make it feel better. So
cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's a good exercise.
That's tomorrow morning for me.
Awesome.
Yeah. So you said you're 50 what?
52.
No,
He's 50. He's 52. I'm 68.
Yeah, because I was thinking, like, if you look at me and Bobby side by side, one of us is 10 years older than the other. But people would probably guess which one wrong because I'm 42.
You're 42, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm 10 years younger. So I got 10 years to
You're
get.
not 62.
It's the beard. It's the beard that makes you look more mature.
So I've got 10 years to get to Bobby's level of health.
Or beyond.
And this is the thing I'll explain to you. You literally will go the opposite direction. So if you're 50 right now, you're going to feel 30 if you start doing this for the next year.
Yeah.
It literally changes you quickly. Okay. And I was telling this is I had pro athletes before COVID in person. I had 8 pictures. I was helping down in San Diego. And they hadn't done these moves before. They hadn't done a wall windmill, a runner stretch. And then I have some strengthening stuff I do on the mat with medicine ball, push-ups, and a pal off walkout. They had never done these things before, the way I was teaching it. So very simple, but like I said, very complex in the movements if we're going to dive into muscle groups and why and rotation and all that. So anyway.
Yeah, this has been great. Yeah, Bobby, I'm actually connecting you to a purely for selfish reasons, but also I think it's a good connection. Probably the best physical trainer, physical therapist out here in my area, who I'm going to be going to tomorrow. Because I want you two to connect. She combines the concept of she does physical therapy and physical training, because a lot of people, they go through physical therapy and then they're like, you're good enough, goodbye. And then the trainer would be like, I'm not touching you because you're fragile. I don't want to break you, and I don't know enough about that. I just know how to put heavy things on you. So there's this gap, and they're like, but okay, I'm functional, but how do I get healthier and stay that way? So she actually bridges that gap. But I think first, I think you'd have a lot to talk about, and second, I'd like you talking to each other because that'd be good for me. So
yeah, well, the thing is, that's one of the things I've been trying to do with physical therapy is one physical therapist can work with 4 people if you use my mat, because I can teach you stuff that you're going to do it exactly as I want you to without me having to watch you and go, no, move your foot there, move your foot there, move your hand there, that sort of stuff. So it really simplifies it. And I'm actually going to go meet with Kaiser next week to talk about this, to really make a difference and then change. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been great for me. Hopefully Phil and Wayne and the audience have gotten something out of it too. But if not,
Bobby can have my time.
Yeah, it's not my show, and that's what matters. I'm glad. Yeah, that's what I love about the show. I never know. I mean, I know who's going to be on. I have a spreadsheet, but I never know who's going to be on. And so, the kind of conversations we have are always interesting and dynamic and far-reaching. So, speaking of interesting, dynamic, and far-reaching, next, Phil is going to talk to us about the value and importance of emotional intelligence.
Wow. Well, I like what Bobby had to say about turning a complex set of ideas into something simplistic to do and explain. So I help executives and organizations succeed by developing their emotional intelligence, and it's a very all-encompassing type of intelligence that's extremely challenging to develop, but the results are are phenomenal. I've helped organizations generate over $1.5 billion in revenue, and executives progress in their careers, and there's all sorts of positive benefits. But it's although most people want better results than they're currently getting, actually doing what I call the emotional labor to achieve those results is a lot more difficult than people think. We have significant both biological and sociological resistance to change, 3 primary sources. But we're facing a tsunami of change with a 500 million year old brain that doesn't like change. And the development of our emotional intelligence is a critical part of our development that we never got. We didn't get it from our educational system. We didn't get it through our careers. And because some scientists estimate that in this century, we could experience the equivalent of 20,000 years worth of change. So change is increasing at an exponential rate. And whenever it's going to trigger increasing levels of drama, chaos, and conflict in us. So we really need to be developing our emotional intelligence. More and more organizations are hiring, promoting, and developing largely based on emotional intelligence. So that probably doesn't make a lot of sense to our listeners here, but works like hell, and it's extremely important.
Yeah, well, no, that definitely does make sense. Certainly with the change factor. One of my hobbies is studying history, and they in especially military history, they talk about how if a general from 1500 fell asleep and woke up in 1600, he'd face a pretty similar battlefield. If a general fell asleep in 1800 and woke up in 1900, or fell asleep in 1900 and woke up in 2000, they wouldn't even know which end was up. Between and you see that in World War One. That there had been a sea change. None of the generals got the memo, and they were fighting a 19th century war with 20th century weapons.
Yeah. In terms of we're actually those people living in the 15th century, relatively speaking, when we based on the accelerated rate of change. Mm-hmm. Let me just give our listeners the 3 primary sources of resistance they will encounter.
Oh, that'd be great. Yes.
On the way to getting change and better results. The first 2 are biological. First one is a part of our old lizard brain called the amygdala that for the last 500 million years have been trying to keep us safe and alive by making sure we never leave the safety of our comfort zone. So if we do, it secretes a hormone into our bloodstream called cortisol that causes the executive center of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, to shut off, and we go into what psychologists refer to as an amygdala hijack. Some people run away, some people freeze like a deer in the headlights, some people lash out, and they often say and do things they later regret. When that happens in conflict situations, people die. And when it happens in business or personal situations, relationships die. We burn trust. So as an analogy, if you think of your amygdala as a very frightened 4-year-old child, the development of our emotional intelligence acts like a big brother or a big sister to quiet the amygdala response down and better enable us to feel the fear and anxiety that's automatically triggered in us when we move outside of our comfort zone and move through it towards the vision of our desired results, as opposed to allowing that anxiety to keep us trapped in our comfort zones. The second biological source of resistance we have to change is our existing habits. Once we develop a habit, it's there forever. It's actually a neural network pathway in our brain that we create through our actions. And although we can develop new habits at any age, it's called brain plasticity or neurogenesis, those new habits are always going to be weaker than our old habits, because when we're younger, there's an insulation layer that goes around the neural network pathway called myelin, and it's thicker when we're younger than when we're older. So even though the new habits can work better than the old habits, there's going to be an ongoing battle between the old habits and new habits for dominance. The third source of resistance we have to change is sociological, meaning the people around us don't want us to change. Because if we change and start to get better results, maybe they're going to have to change, and that scares the hell out of them. And then the best way to ensure they don't have to change is to make sure we fail. So they can say, look, I told you so, now get your head down and get back into the herd with the rest of us. So although the development of emotional intelligence produces phenomenal, I'll give you an example, it produces phenomenal results every time that continue to increase in value. It's like Navy SEAL training for emotions. It's much more difficult. Emotional labor is much more difficult than physical labor or intellectual labor, but the ROI is remarkable. Let me give you a quick example here. And I'll tell you a company that's currently doing over $1 trillion a year in revenue every year. And their primary focus is on hiring people with above average levels of emotional intelligence. So think of our ability to do intellectual labor is genetic. If you have a high IQ, your parents had a high IQ, their parents had a high IQ, and you inherited those genes. So think of your ability to do intellectual labor as somebody giving you $10,000 a day for 31 days. So at the end of 31 days, you've got $310,000. But think of the development of your emotional intelligence as a penny that doubles in value every day for 31 days. So day one, you've got a penny. Day 31, you've got $10.7 million. Day 40, you've got over 5 billion. Day 50, you've got over 5 trillion. So whereas not everybody can have 160 IQ, everybody can develop their emotional intelligence. And the ROI from doing the emotional labor that requires is far greater than our ability to do intellectual labor. As a matter of fact, UC Berkeley completed a 40-year study where they compared IQ and EQ, and they determined that emotional intelligence was 400% more important in achieving success than intellectual intelligence. And actually, I think that number is very low. But the development of your emotional intelligence, and I want to stress this for our listeners, the development of our emotional intelligence guarantees career, personal, and corporate success. Guaranteed. But as I say, it's harder than hell. And most people actually, almost everybody wants better results than they're currently getting. But the reality is that hardly anybody's willing to do the emotional labor that change requires to get better results. So what they do instead, unfortunately, is they try and use position-based power to control and manipulate others to get them to change. And that's what we've been doing for a very long time. And that's why the current level of employee engagement worldwide, according to Gallup, is around 13%. Low levels of employee engagement are costing the US economy over $1 trillion a year. So basically, organizations that lack emotional intelligence, that are trying to control and manipulate others, are very toxic environments. And we have to change that. We have to become more emotionally intelligent to be able to deal with the fear and anxiety that's getting triggered at an increasing rate because of the accelerating rate of global change we're experiencing. So the development of emotional intelligence isn't a solution to the challenges we face. It is the only solution to the challenges we face. So here's that company. that's currently doing over $1 trillion a year in revenue, whose primary focus is on hiring people with above average levels of emotional intelligence. The company is Apple. That's why when you walk into an Apple store, that energy you feel is an example of a more emotionally intelligent environment. They're not trying to sell you anything. They want you to have a great experience. They want to try and understand your pain and, if possible, offer a solution to your pain. Whether you buy anything or not is secondary to their desire to want to serve you. And maybe you go tell your friends and they'll tell their friends. So the development of emotional intelligence represents the future of organizational development. More and more companies, Apple, Google, Southwest Airlines, JetBlue, Infosys, Whole Foods, FedEx, Costco, and others, are hiring, promoting, and developing primarily based on emotional intelligence. So anyways, that's probably more than you ever wanted to know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that definitely resonates with what I do. You know, I'm a connect in my background. You'd normally see I'm a networking concierge, but you'll have to imagine. But I'm all about who, not how, and so you don't need a lot of IQ if you have the EQ to bring people onto your team who have the IQ. You know, you just need to be able to get smarter people than you to talk. And Bobby Wayne, feel free to unmute yourself. There was background noise coming from somewhere, so I muted you. But the other thing I'm finding is in the coaching space, like the kind of people we have on this show, tend to be very much about giving, about, like, you know, Bobby just gave a 20-minute workshop on fitness, some of which you buy his equipment for, some of which you can do with what you got in your house already. And he's trying to, you know, share and help people and help them be healthier. And as a benefit of that, I imagine it helps his business. But he's not, you know, he didn't say, now go buy my course or go sign up for my, you know, go buy my thing or sign up for my thing. Although you should go buy his thing because those blocks are amazing. But you know, that's not what he was leading from. It's like the Apple store you said, starting from how do I provide a positive experience? How do I benefit the world, create value, and then cause that to come back to me?
Phil, that's one of the things that would be good is the combination of what you do and I do. Is a lot of people are in pain, so sometimes they're taking meds or they're doing something to feel better at work, but they're much more inefficient. And the efficiency of the workplace gets better with how I help with the corporate wellness, that sort of thing. So sometime we should talk about that and how that would work, because it really makes a difference in how people feel.
You know, I'd be happy to. And when you say what are the things, the central thesis of what I've been proving all over the world in the last 21 years that you may find interesting is that there's an underlying energy physics to this whole process of developing leadership and emotional intelligence that makes the results as predictable and quantifiable as any physical science. So you can't fail.
Yeah.
Phil, I have a question for you.
Sure.
If you understand this is important and you want to go beyond jargon, which I hope people want to, is there a primer? Is there a couple of books you recommend, maybe even when you've written, where we can get the capsule version?
Great question, Wayne. Yeah, I've written 6 or 7 books, and I've published over 5,000 articles, and I've got my own podcast, and I have an emotional intelligence newsletter on LinkedIn, and I wouldn't recommend any of them. And I'll tell you. And I'll tell you why. The development of emotional intelligence is an experiential process. It's not an intellectual process, meaning that you cannot develop emotional intelligence by having a conversation or reading a book or watching a video. Those are intellectual pursuits. So the big challenge is we don't know what we don't know. So the development of emotional intelligence always requires an initial leap of faith, usually driven by pain and urgent desire for better results than they're currently getting. But it's interesting. I often talk to my people I'm coaching as they're going through the program, and I said, you know, they're really amazed at the results they're getting. And I say, yeah, let me ask you something. Is there anything I could have said to you in the beginning, before you started down this path, that could have prepared you for what you know now? And everybody always says no. There's nothing, there's no magic words that you could have told me that could have helped me to understand what I understand experientially today. Does that answer your question?
Brilliantly.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. So Phil, you did send a Calendly link.
Yeah.
This one here, which hopefully you wanted me to share.
Oh yeah, I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to chat with anybody that wants to chat about it and maybe get some more information. But the bottom line is, you have to experience to really appreciate the value and importance of emotional intelligence. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish there were a pill or some kind of magic potion that people could take to help to gain that awareness, but unfortunately there isn't.
Yeah, I can definitely understand. But with something, I've had many of those experiences where I'm like, what could I have told myself 10 years ago? You know, if I could have gone back in time 10 years and be like, I'm from the future, I know what you have to do. I could totally imagine myself being like, that's not possible. I can't do that.
We talk about paradigms and comfort zones and stuff like that. We're only actually conscious about 3 to 5% of the time.
Yeah.
The rest of the time we're relying on our habits to determine our behavior and our results. So if we want to get better results than we're currently getting, if we want to raise our level of awareness, if we want to raise our level of consciousness, then we have to develop the habits in order to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I did think it was interesting when you mentioned the habits and changing them. That I like to joke that I need a past life regression to remember 2019, because things are so different post, not directly because of the pandemic, but because the pandemic caused me to have a path change off of what I was doing and into my coaching journey. And I've since met hundreds of coaches, and I'm surrounded by different people. I live in a different house. I do a different job. So, all my habits changed with that. And a lot of it is I put systems in place. And so they're now very deeply rooted. I couldn't even tell you what I did 3 years ago.
You bring up a really good point, and I just want to touch on it briefly. Do you remember where you were? You don't tell me this, but do you remember where you were on September the 11th, 2001?
I do.
Do you remember where you were on September the 11th, 2010?
I probably don't.
Do you remember where you were on September the 11th, 2020?
I could guess better, but no.
Okay, so my point is that the reason you remember September the 11th, 2001 is that memory has an emotion attached to it.
Oh.
It's called an emotional anchor. So in order for us to achieve better results and develop the habits, develop our emotional intelligence, we have to develop an emotional connection with a desired result that's greater than the fear that's going to get generated in us as we move outside of our comfort zone to create those habits that are going to create that result. So that if your emotional connection to what it is you're trying to achieve isn't greater than your fear, you will not be willing to do the work required. So the starting point is always developing that emotional attachment to the vision of your desired result. That becomes the fuel for the journey. Without that, change is impossible. You may want better results, but you will not be willing to do the emotional labor required to get those results.
So that capsule I was asking for, you just gave me.
Oh, you're welcome.
That's the same thing with people. A lot of my athletes, if they don't feel pain, they won't do the little things I give them. And then all of a sudden their back hurts and they're like, Bob, I need to get back on the field. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? They need pain to listen.
Yep. There's only two sources of motivation that will cause us to leave our comfort zone. One is pain. The other one is passion. And hardly anybody's connected with their passion. So for the most part, the people that at least initially, are motivated to do the work that change requires, are motivated by an urgent desire or pain to get better results than they're currently getting. So what I always ask people to start off with, I say, what do you want? I don't tell them about the program or anything. I say, what do you want? Because when somebody tells you what they want, they're also telling you what they don't have. And the bigger the gap between where they are versus where they want to be, the more pain they're in, the more motivated they are to look for a solution to close that gap. But without that motivation, change is impossible. It's impossible.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's some really good stuff. And I know we have a few minutes left, but I still want to get Wayne talking about building community. So, Wayne, talk to us about building your community.
Cool. Well, I always tried to put in something that I thought the audience would care about. And yes, I wrote a book. It's called 31 Days. It's available right now in your bookstore or Amazon. There we are. That's my tagline. You can get the book there too. But I have found that with the pandemic, community has gotten much harder to generate. 10 years ago, I think our church, in many cases, or other religious organizations, our church was our community. Some people it was a service club. Our Rotary was our community. Some people it was geography. Their neighborhood was their community. And it seems like the pandemic swept it all across clean. And I want, whether it's authors who want to write their first book, or people who find themselves accidentally retired and don't know what to do now, or whatever makes them, as you said, passionate. We'll leave our other authors about talking about pain and pain relief, but I want to talk to passionate people who want to make a difference. Also, not all passions are tied into commerce. I have found that culturally, we are told to go after your passion, you'll get rich and famous and blah, blah, blah. Hasn't happened for many. But what I want is people, the audience or one of us, to say, you know what you mentioned about community, here's something I, as a community, would like to be in. And I don't care whether, as I said, it's trains or giving money or orphanages or becoming an author. I just want people to develop a community because we need that emotional intelligence to link. We are designed, we're social animals. Any thoughts?
I love that.
I agree.
I have a question. What does MBL stand for?
Master of Business Leadership.
I like it.
Thank you. I actually coined that about 21 years ago, kind of tongue in cheek to Master of Business Administration.
Yep.
Because we don't need more Masters of Business Administration. We need Masters of Business Leadership.
I like that.
Yeah. Well, and wait, I've always been about building community. My first business was a game store, which was very successful, except for not making money. And it was successful because it built a community. It survived just barely financially, couldn't pay me, but it brought people together in that space. And so I've always had a slightly skewed view of what the world of community is like, because I tend to try to build them where I go. But I think there's a lot of people, especially as church attendance has fallen off and people aren't in social groups, or, I was in Rotary, but everyone in the club was 30 to 40 years older than me. Mm-hmm. And they'd been in there for 30 years. So I was kind of like the new guy, even 5 years in when I was president. Mm-hmm. And so like it was sort of a community, but wasn't necessarily mine. And trying to find where are those community spaces. And now with my business, something I'm focusing on, because I meet all these wonderful people. And I realize everything in the aggregate that I'm building, the open virtual coffee and the Power Lunch live show and the different things. And the new thing I'm doing, which I'm going to put on the screen here, I'm launching the Networking Gathering, which is an open networking event. Anyone can come in, second Thursday of the month, 5 p.m. Eastern, to bring people together. And it's not, it's not quite as good as hanging out at church together, but you get to see the same people over and over and get that sense of community. That's something great that I found in the world of coaching and entrepreneurship is I get to meet.
Michael, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I looked at your LinkedIn profile and I've seen that networking and community building relationships has been a passion of yours for a long time.
Mm.
Why is that? What's your why?
What is my why? Because I'm a hyper extrovert, partly. So I need lots of people. As I've learned more about ADHD, I've learned that part of it is having less dopamine receptors means we need more high dopamine experiences, which includes social activity, especially meeting new people. I used to joke that I network compulsively, and then I'm like, oh, that's not a joke. I literally neurologically am compelled to network.
Excellent.
And it's a compulsion that manifests in different ways with different people. For some people, it's base jumping. For some people, it's cheating on a spouse. For some people, it's drinking. But for me, I've channeled it towards networking, which when actually in my 20s, it was I think I did it fairly respectfully and properly. But I knew a number of ladies, shall we say. And once I got married, I redirected that energy into knowing a number of different people instead, which I think long-term is probably a better strategy, better approach to building a long-term community. But that's a lot of what pushed me. And then from a world perspective, as Wayne said, the more communities we have, the better we are. If we see each other if we see ourselves as part of a community and not, I am an island, I am completely independent, and I don't need anyone. I say on the computer that someone else built on the internet I don't understand, powered by electricity created by someone I don't know. Yeah. We realize how interconnected we are. We're more interconnected and independent than ever before, and yet we feel more independent because it's so much technology rather than people.
It's interesting that your passion for networking and building community is hardwired into you.
Yeah, you could say that.
Cool.
Something that only occurred to me just in this show, that based on things you've said, Michael, is you started some of your networking to build your business before you realized you were better at networking, and that became the business. Mm-hmm. But I find you're actually segueing to the next step where you're networking for community and you're doing it for the community as an aside, even though it has no business connection directly, because you are hungry for community. So I see this linear process that sort of started and ended at the same place in a way.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always been about building community. The challenge was if I can't get paid to do it, I have to spend my time doing something else. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
that's the litmus test for what living and working on purpose means for somebody, mm-hmm. when they would do it for free.
Yeah.
If Michael Jordan hadn't gotten paid $1, he would have been in a gym somewhere playing basketball.
I believe that.
So the more we can connect with what our passion is, actually we get better results that require less effort and we have more fun.
Oh yeah. Well, for 2021 and the 10 years before that, I was making all kinds of introductions and not getting paid for it. And finally someone said, some people get paid to make introductions. And I'm like, wait, what? that would be like hearing some people get paid to drink beer. I do that all the time.
Yep. I spent 20 years in the semiconductor industry before doing what I've been doing for the last 21 years. And I had somebody come to me that I was working with in around 1980 and saying, you should really be a coach. And it took me over 20 years to have the courage to take the leap of faith to do what I'm doing now.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine part of your challenge was you were probably fairly successful in the career.
Yeah. And you know what? Great point, Michael. The heart of my success was my coaching. Mm-hmm. And I just happened to be in an industry. I mean, I could have been selling shoes.
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
just like you could have been on an island and you would have been trying to get all the kangaroos to work together.
Right. Well, and sometimes people ask me, like, how did you build a networking business? And I answer half joking, half serious, because I'm not good at anything else.
Yeah.
I am one of the blessings I now realize was by not being good at anything else, and by not being good at like getting a job, because my ADHD keeps me from going through the job process very effectively. I never found some place where I stuck. So I bounced, drifted from this sales job to that's it. Never made the money I wanted to make. Was never, I never got the golden handcuffs because I was never making the money. And so when the opportunity did present itself, I was able to take it because there was no there was no risk in leaving. There was no risk in leaving.
1A or 1B, and they were both the same thing.
Yeah.
As I mentioned to you earlier, I was born with dyslexia.
Mm-hmm.
And back in those days, there was no such thing as dyslexia or ADD or ADHD. But I can tell you, if I hadn't had the good fortune, looking in hindsight, if I hadn't had the good fortune of being born with dyslexia, there's no way in hell I'd be doing what I'm doing today.
Yep.
Because my brain doesn't work the way most people's brains work. It forced me to do a lot of emotional labor that helped prepare me for what I do. But if I hadn't been forced to do that, if I hadn't been ripped out of my comfort zone and forced to move through the anxiety that created, I wouldn't have. It's like going to the dentist. Nobody would ever go to a dentist unless they were either in pain or trying to avoid pain.
Yep. And that's actually a great segue to my other show, the Neurodiversity Superpowers podcast that Phil, I believe you're going to be on at some point. But it's about that exact thing, celebrating the ways that being neurodiverse give us advantages and opportunities. Because if I'd known this, now, would I have received the message? I don't know. But if I'd known this years ago, that I didn't have a disability, I have a superpower that comes with some challenges, I think I would have approached things very differently than being like, well, I'm disabled with ADHD. I guess the best I can do is this sales job that doesn't pay me what I need.
Except that everything that's happened to you in your life to this point has brought you to where you are today.
Right. Yeah. So I wouldn't want to go back and change anything because that would change everything. But at the same time, if I ran into someone who is in the place I was at 25, I'm not trying to be like, hey, things are going to be rough for the next 15 years, but there's a reason for it. I would probably want to give that guy advice to advance the agenda a little bit.
But at least you got to sell Volkswagens.
I did get to sell Volkswagens. That was pretty cool. Yeah. Quick funny story, and then we'll wrap up. I used to sell Volkswagens. I was they have something called the Retail Qualification Championship. Top 20 salespeople in the country based on knowledge and satisfaction scores and whatnot. I got flown down to Dallas. They compete in this like knowledge competition. They flew me down there. I didn't win, but they flew me down there. It was awesome. I came back, and the next month my dealership fired me because I wanted to take 2 days off during the middle of the week. So that's how smart employers are. I suspect that the people who run that place might be considered low EQ leadership because they made certain decisions, dogmatic decisions that did not seem to be the best long-term strategy, but they certainly served their ego well.
You stepped away from the herd. Herd doesn't like that.
Yeah, but it served me well long term, not at the time, but long term, I'm certainly glad that happened. But all right, so we are in the 59th minute of our 1 hour show. So let's take a quick moment to go around, share whatever final thoughts you might have, and so Wayne, go ahead. What's your final thoughts?
One, it was great to talk to somebody from Toronto. Woohoo! It's the only city that most Americans have actually heard of in our country. Second, I'm amazed at the power lunch, where most of us thought about getting on a podcast so we can have this huge audience listen to us. No, I actually enjoyed being with the four of you for lunch.
Yeah, I agree.
That's good because the audience isn't that huge. So I'm glad you enjoyed being with us.
Just the right number of people.
Yep. Phil, final thoughts.
I would, as a final thought, I would encourage our listeners to bet on themselves by developing their emotional intelligence.
Like that.
Very good. And Bobby, final thoughts.
Well, I'd say it's lunchtime. This is like the perfect time to do a few movements to make yourself better. And I would do 1 or 2 every day, and you'll start feeling better. Because I don't try to make people fitness people. I just want you to move a little bit. I promise you'll feel better if you guys, order the tools, talk to Michael, talk to the different people using it. But yeah, I'll leave you guys with that.
Thanks, Bob.
Have a great day. Thanks
All
for having
right.
us on. It was great talking to all you guys.
Thank you, everyone, for being on there.
Enjoyed it.
As I mentioned, I had the networking gathering the second Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern, which is 2 p.m., I believe 2 p.m. Bobby time and 5 p.m. everyone else's time. guywhoknowsaguy.com/gathering. And then coming up on December 19th, which is from 11 to 6 Eastern time, is the Entrepreneur Summit. So you've got to go to summits. You got to learn things. You got to network. So why not hang out with a bunch of fun, geeky people and do it? guywhoknowsaguy.com/entrepreneur or /EN rather. Yeah, I always say like the content we have is as good as everyone else's. It's not better. It's not worse. It's just way more fun to get it the way we deliver it. So join us for that. So thank you, everyone, for being on the show. And thank you to our millions of viewers or dozens of viewers, however many we have. Thank you to all of you. We have 3 reactions, so that means there's some engagement. So that's a good thing. And thank you to everyone who was involved in this show. And with that, I'm hitting this red button. Bye, everybody.